Everybody. Miguel has started what I was going to say at the beginning. I did my PhD in STIS, and I did it on the obesity epidemic and the development of it as a public health problem. The development of excess body weight is a public health concern problem. And I have now moved to the Global Public Health Unit, which is in social policy, not in public health, confusingly. And this presentation has very little about my kind of disciplinary identity, possibly because I'm still confused. What it does have, I like your circular diagrams, Anne. I need to know how to do that because I think in lists. So I'm going to talk a little bit about food as a mundane technology. I'm going to give a really rapid overview of technological innovation in the food system. And then I'm going to talk about my research focus, which is diet, nutrition, and health, and link that to the project I'm working on at the moment, which is a tobacco control project. So I'm going to talk about the health effects of industrial diets, talk about public health and industrial epidemics, of which food diet-related chronic disease is one, and the health effects of tobacco are another. And then I'm going to come up with some conclusions that address the overall theme of this retreat that probably might start an argument, might not. So, I did my master's training at Edinburgh, and I've always thought of food as a really important technology that STS does not address properly. I mean, according to the people who call us the cooking aid, it could be the first human technology, and we don't study it properly. I don't know why. I'm a kind of one woman, two woman now, trying to change this. And with that kind of opening comment, I'm going to fast forward a couple of millennia to the 20th century and, oops, not do that. Come on, I hate you. Talk about innovation in the food system. I'm primarily interested in the 20th century. And there are accounts of innovation in the food system, most of which come out of food policy. And I don't see this kind of, the scale of this sort of innovation being recognized in other academic accounts, which is why I've put this list up. So Anne talked a bit about mechanization of agriculture. There are also the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. There's plant and animal breeding. There are also kind of more mundane things like improved storage, which reduce spoilage, and the patterns of subsidy, which one of the questions touched on. In food processing and manufacture, there's more mechanization. There's techniques, ingredients, products, and packaging that are extraordinarily innovative. I don't see social science really talking about in any great detail the innovation that has taken place in food processing and manufacture. And one of the results of these things has been greater increase of scale and a concentration of ownership. There's also distribution. We talked a bit about Rotterdam and the wheat in the port of Rotterdam. And containerization and lower cost of distribution are really important in the long supply chains in the modern food system. Cheap labor means that it's cheaper to process chickens in Thailand and ship them back to Europe for sale. Refrigeration is a really important technology, and refrigerated supply chains combined with really sophisticated ICT use in computerized stock control systems. Food policy talks about this a bit, but I don't see the kind of detailed work studying the impact of innovations that you've had in the financial system being done in the food system. And finally, there's a whole load of stuff in retailing about increased availability, the large market share of heavily advertised and heavily processed foods. There are also implications about the fact that food markets in developed countries are saturated. And going back to Anne's kind of research, so there are terms of trade that suppliers get for their food. Farmers do not enjoy dealing with large retailers. And that's a kind of whistle-stop tour of, I wanted to do that to point out all the sorts of issues that come up when you start looking at innovation in the food system. And despite what I'm going to go on to say, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not personally or academically. I mean, increased food production that has kept pace with population growth in the 20th century is really important. Now, these benefits are very unevenly distributed, both globally and within particular populations, but they do exist. If you talk about contamination, then if you read about the Victorian food supply in Britain, the things that were put in bread and tea, for example, were scary. They were toxic additives to make bread white and tea black or green. There is also the fact that the amount of money, again, well-to-do consumers in affluent countries spend on food it's a much lower proportion of their income. So in early 20th century in the UK, households could spend up to 40% of their income on average on food. Now it's much nearer 10%. And we have much better diets, much more interesting, more varied diets. Better is maybe overstating it. That's why I put up those 4 pictures. I grew up in the 70s. I remember what food was like in the 70s. Those are 4 things that I strongly dislike. Instant coffee, Findus crispy pancakes, nasty instant puddings. And the avocado is up because I didn't taste an avocado till I was an adult, 18, if that counts as an adult. And the first one I got hold of was unripe. I mean, it was such a novelty, I didn't know how to eat it. I tried it and thought, what's this hard thing? I don't like it. So I personally, as well as an academic, am very grateful that of innovation in the food system. But there's always, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So my research focus is, and my particular interest is on the relationship between diet, nutrition, and health. I'm interested in how the composition of average diets has changed, largely in the UK because that's the context I know best. I'm interested in what the health effects what are understood to be the health effects of such changes. And because I'm interested in healthy eating, I'm interested in what kinds of evidence are used in the formulation of healthy eating guidelines. And I have the Mediterranean thing up there. It's up there partly because it's a nice image, but I've developed research proposals around the history of the Mediterranean diet. I'm still going to keep going at that a little bit longer, but we shall see if I can get anyone to fund them. So now, with that in mind, we go on to the negative consequences. And this long quote is from Tim Lang, who is possibly the best known food policy expert in the UK. And the term nutrition transition is very common in public health nutrition. It's not a controversial idea that as populations get richer, their diets change. There's a convergence on what we call a Western diet, which is a diet high in processed foods, high in fat, sugar, and salt, low in staple grains and vegetables. And I like the way he phrases it, that feast day foods become everyday foods. And when he says at the bottom, diets that are now known to be inappropriate for health become normalized, what he's referring to is rising rates of non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and stroke. So, as I said, within public health, the idea of the nutrition transition is it's not a controversial, it's a widely accepted notion. The idea of an industrial epidemic is newer and not as widely accepted, but it's the idea that just like tobacco consumption causes diseases in individuals, so does excess alcohol consumption, and so does a kind of industrialized diet that I've been talking about. And so it's an idea that these can all have a common cause. They are epidemics that are caused by the consumption of industrial products. And because this is caused by the activities of companies, what we need to do is look at the activities of companies and work out what effects they're causing and how to prevent the health effects. We're shifting from telling individuals not to do something to looking at the activity of industry and its associates. And this, I am currently working on a tobacco control project. And this kind of perspective on the industrial epidemic comes, it's a kind of shared project between tobacco control and people working on alcohol. But there are also people in food talking about it. So there's big, in the same way that people talk about big tobacco, they talk about big soda and big food. Now the project I'm working on is looking at a series of submissions to the Australian government, and we're looking at common attitudes across the alcohol industry, the food and beverage industry, and the tobacco industry to the making of public health policy and industry's role in it. And there's probably too much for you to get a full, it's probably too busy a slide given that I'm going to rattle through it, but all industries stress the importance of partnership and collaboration. All of them say that you need industry to make public health policy, that it cannot be made without the involvement of industry. And this is important because what they are doing as part of this collaborative process is lobbying for less effective methods. What they're doing is lobbying for less regulation, and regulation that relies on modifying individual behavior that public health evidence says is not the most effective. And within tobacco control, there's an approach that involves excluding the tobacco industry from public health policy making. And the industrial epidemics approach argues that we should be thinking about the same for the food industry. Such methods have been shown to work in reducing tobacco consumption. So arguments within public health are now saying that treating the alcohol industry and the food and drink industry in the same way may work to reduce rates of non-communicable disease. So this has been rattled through quite a lot of big topics. I think innovation in the food system is a really fruitful area of study for ISSTI. I think there are people working on it, but they are very disjointed. And I don't know about kind of high-profile approaches that examine the food system in the way that the energy system or ICTs have been examined. I think it's very obvious that we will need highly interdisciplinary research to do this. But I think, and this is where I think I'm breaking from quite a lot of other people, I think there are really important differences in underlying assumptions. So my experience of innovation studies says that it is generally supportive of industry aims and works with industry to some extent. And within public health, certainly the bit of public health I'm involved in, we don't do that. So there's a basic incompatibility going on here. Thank you very much.
We've got time to 1-2 specific questions for Isabel.